There we
There we
go.
go.
All right, we're going to get started. Hey, welcome everybody. I still see some people putting who they are in the chat. Amy, I see you there. It's great to have you on the webinar. Lots of people. The furthest I think I've seen is California. If somebody, I don't know, I can't keep track of everybody, but I did see a California on there. I saw Nebraska. Hey, Steve from Evansville. Hadn't seen you in a while. Hey, glad to see you again, sir. All right, we got people from all over. I see Denver. There's one from California. That's pretty cool. Oh, the state of Washington. I think we have a winner. It's got to be the farthest, at least from where I'm at,
Mhm.
here in North Florida. So it's awesome. Thank you for everybody for joining us today. I'm Mike Schentrup. I'm the founder of Advanced Police Concepts. We've been around for a while. We're going to be talking to Wayne South here in a second, but it's going to take me like 2 minutes to kind of talk about APC. If you don't know, you probably got an email from us. If not, if you found us on LinkedIn or something like that, that's great. We believe the men and women of law enforcement deserve awesome training from the best instructors in topics that matter. That's our mission statement, and everything we do kind of abides by that. Um, APC, me and Wayne, we started the FTO conference several years ago. We're about to have our fifth one, Wayne. Can you believe that? It's amazing. This year it's going to be in Gulf Shores, Alabama, right at the Embassy Suites on the water there, May 4th and 6th. So if you're from up north, it's a great time to come south. It's wonderful weather there in May. It's going to be beautiful, but the networking and bringing everybody together as a group and learning. Our speakers this year, I think, are really going to be on point too. We've really kind of focused again on the nuts and bolts of being an FTO and some of those things. But the networking, I think, is probably the best thing. We have networking events all 3 nights. You're together so we can learn from each other. And I've found that over the years, that's probably some of the best connections you can make. I think Matt Boss, the president of Seftoa, put it in the chat room there, the registration link. But seftoa.org, it's an easy one to remember. APC started in 2016. We've been all over the country. I couldn't even list everything anymore. I mean, we've been in over 30 states at this point. Of course, we have online training as well. And Wayne has been a trainer with me almost from the beginning. And he's one of the go-to guys for sure. Everything, mostly investigative. It's all classroom based. We don't do tactical, but we have a lot of things, even corrections, in custody interviewing, de-escalation for corrections. We have our advanced FTO course, and of course, we teach different levels of leadership as well. But our go-to is our frontline leadership course. So we'd love for you to go to advancedpoliceconcepts.com, find out more about our organization, and maybe you'd like to host a class. We are looking for hosts for 2026. Mostly now we're looking for late late spring, summer, and then we're planning all the way into the fall. So if you'd like to host a class, you can get some free seats for your organization if you do host, or you can just bring us for your organization, right? And we're very reasonable when it comes to that, and we're super easy to work with. We're still small enough to where we're very responsive to all our people that we collaborate with. Wayne's actually written 2 books now. His first book was A Lifetime of Service. This came out a couple of years ago, and it's still getting a lot of traction. There's a lot of people out there that have read this book, and I've actually met people who didn't even know me who have read Wayne's book, and then we have a great conversation about it. But today we're here to talk about his newest book, Training to Lead, Mastering the Art of Training and Inspiring the Next Generation. Wayne is truly a subject matter expert when it comes to building up trainers and teaching trainers how to train better and understanding that connection between training and leadership. All right, Wayne, I'm going to unshare our screen right now, and we're just going to we'll ask you a few questions and let's get this thing going.
Sounds good.
Oh, there we go.
Maybe. There we go.
There. All right.
There we go.
I found it. All right, Wayne. Hey, let's get this thing started with, I think, the most obvious question when we talk about writing your book, right?
Yeah.
How is the tenets of leadership and the tenets of being a good trainer, how are they connected, and what made you want to write this book?
Well, Mike, and good morning, everyone. I think training, leadership and training is pivotal and they play together. I've been in law enforcement, well, I did 30 years before I retired and 2 years in corrections and being exposed to the different types of leaders. So I actually wrote a chapter in my book about this because I thought it was important. You can be an authoritarian FTO leader. I use FTO leader. You can be an authoritarian FTO leader, and you might teach your trainee just enough to pass the FTO program, but you don't truly develop them because if you're an authoritarian, you're the type, and I have to say that all new FTOs, I think, sort of fall into this, or at least I did. You want to control everything that they do. When they struggle for a word, you step in and you give it to them. When they struggle just a little bit, you step in and you give it to them. And when you do that, you're really hindering the learning process. I learned later on in my career that I really want my trainees to struggle just a little bit. I want them to struggle for that word. I want them to struggle for that answer. I want to teach them how to use their resources because the authoritarian, they step in and they do everything for them. So you never engage those critical thinking skills or those problem solving skills that we so desperately need. I've had laissez-faire type trainers, and that's the person that you go sit at your favorite place under your favorite shade tree in Florida because it's hot in Florida. You go answer one call, they pretty much handle the call, and then you go back and you sit under that shade tree and wait for the next call. And then I've worked for those, and I'm gonna use these kind of synonymous with each other, even though they're a little bit different. The transformational FTO leader and the servant. And I've had a few of those. I'm not going to name names, but I've had a few of those. And those are the people, those are the leaders that really take an interest in not only the training, but me personally or you personally. And they develop you to become a productive member of your organization who has a lot of critical thinking skills, a lot of problem solving skills. They perform well under stress. And most importantly is they know how to use the resources that we give them. You know, Mike, when you and I started, all those resources were paper. But now every resource possible is available to them on their smartphone or the computer inside their car. So the reason I wrote about this is if you think about the learning environment you create inside the car, you want it to be conducive where the trainee is not afraid to ask questions. If you work in corrections, you certainly want them to ask you questions. If they struggle with something, I never wanted a trainee that was afraid, and that's not the right word, but was afraid to come and ask me a question or tell me that they didn't understand something. You know, in a classroom, I say if you have a question, ask because 10 other people in the class probably have the same question. But when you have one trainee sitting in the car with you or walking the cells with you, the pods or the wings of the correctional facility, you want to be that person that's approachable and you want to be that person that they're not afraid to tell you that they're struggling with something or they don't understand something. So that's why I think it is so important that and if you take the little assessments then that tell you that you're authoritarian, that's okay. Now there's a time and a place for that, but if that's your go-to style, just be very cognizant of that when you're training a new trainee and make sure that you sort of, well, I'll say take yourself out of your comfort zone just a little bit because our predominant leadership style is where we are comfortable. And, you know, trainers, we have to grow as well. If we're comfortable, we're not growing. So if you are that authoritarian, just be cognizant of that and step back a little bit and maybe change your leadership style slightly with that individual because an FTO program it is not my program, it's theirs. And adults can only learn at the speed that they're capable of. So you want to create an environment in the car where it is their learning environment, it is their program, and they drive the training. And if you create that environment with your leadership style, they're always driving that training program forward because they're not afraid to take those chances. They're not afraid to struggle because they know that ultimately you're not going to let them fail if you can help it.
I think, and looking back, I know I was relatively authoritarian as a trainer, especially early on in my career as a field training officer. We did a lot of work though. That was the
We did.
trainees were lucky that we did a lot of work. Like that was my thing is that if we do enough work, you're going to learn.
You,
I always had the mindset that if somebody failed my FTO phase, then I failed. And I'll give myself credit for that. I made a lot of mistakes on other things, but that was always my mindset, and that's what I tried to preach to others, that failure is your failure. I will say that, and you kind of touched on it, Wayne, as opposed to, the authoritarian is it's my way. We're going to do things my way.
Mhm.
Um, Talk more about the concept of being flexible enough and humble enough to understand. I think you said it. It's the trainee needs you to kind of come to them uh, and modify your behavior to their learning style a little bit. Talk a little bit more about that.
It absolutely is. And empathy and humility, I'll throw the word empathy in there. A lot of trainers that I've worked with, they sort of forget that they started in the exact same place that their trainee did. So you always have to think like that. It's there again, I'll say it, it's their program. And I think one thing that will help, I just had a young man in a class recently in the western part of Tennessee, and they've revamped their FTO program. And we're always holding the trainee accountable. But how accountable do we hold the actual trainer? And they've revamped their program, and about once a year, an FTO sergeant is going to ride with an FTO and evaluate them. And and they just want to make sure that they're getting the best training available, but they also want to make sure, and he said it, I'll take his words, they want to make sure that their trainers are approachable. So stepping back and changing your style a little bit, that's okay. What I've found from talking to FTOs over the past several years, and I keep notes from people I talk to, is it's hard to let go of control. And they'll tell you control is comfortable. And they're always afraid that their trainee is going to screw up. And we're humans. I'm 60 years old. I've probably screwed up something today. So your trainee is going to screw up something when you're taking them from the relative unknown to the known. And you have to change your leadership style based on the individual. Because, like I said, humans can only learn at the pace that they're capable of. And that might be faster than I am, or that might be a little bit slower than I am. So, a lot of times when we get stuck in one particular leadership style, we assume that trainees know how to do the small things because we've been doing this long enough that we've moved most things into our working memory file. So we can just kind of do it, the old adage, we can do it without thinking. But a trainee struggles with that. And if you want a perfect example of that, it's a funny little video you can look up on YouTube, and it's how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And it's two kids trying to teach their dad how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and he follows their instructions to the T. And it's very funny, but it really illustrates in an FTO class how you can't assume that someone knows how to do something, especially when they're in the FTO program. And changing your leadership style a little bit, that shows the trainee also that you are invested in their success. And a trainee has, well, anyone, but a trainee, they have to know that's giving them that psychological safety. They have to know that you were invested in their program. You were invested in developing them, regardless of if they're a superstar or they're struggling. Uh, so you have to be invested in them.
Yeah, and I would say there were folks in my training experience that were on the verge of being, thrown out of the agency,
Yes,
and they made it through, and some people didn't think they should make it through, and then they became excellent police officers, right?
absolutely.
So I think we always have to keep that in mind too, is that and that I'll remember one, and I won't name his name, but that's the one that taught me how close he was to being thrown out of organization. He became a fantastic officer,
Yes,
narcotics investigator. I mean, just great. So um, be humble
absolutely.
enough to know that maybe I'm just not connecting at this moment, or
Right.
whatever I'm doing. Maybe I need to switch it a little bit, or sometimes even just say, hey, listen, this isn't working. Let's get you to somebody else. I want you to succeed.
One of the things I encourage FTOs to do is at the end of every shift, debrief the day. And one of the questions you should ask them is there anything that you needed tonight that I wasn't able to give to you or I didn't provide? And if you've created that environment in the car where they feel like they can be honest with you, um, they're going to tell you what they need. And I think that's invaluable.
Hey, listen, throw some questions in the chat. We'll definitely get to them, or comments. And once you comment, I guarantee somebody's going to answer your comment. So let's get that chat moving here. Um, So you talked about leadership styles, right?
Yes.
And I think it's interesting that, you can learn your own leadership style early on in a car with a field a police trainee,
Hmm.
but that carries on to the future,
It
right?
does.
I
It
mean,
certainly does.
you definitely don't want to be an authoritarian as a leader, as a sergeant. You don't want to be a laissez-faire as a sergeant. You need to
No.
find that middle ground, whether it's transformational, whether you call it servant leadership, whatever
Right.
those things are. Talk more about how you can develop skills while a FTO, and maybe, if you're a FTO coordinator or if you're a FTO commander, because I've seen some rank in our chat that are on this call. Maybe if we explain that to our training officers, like, hey, this is the base, this is the ground where you learn how to lead one other person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I won't name names either, but I can think of at least three trainees that I had that taught me more about being a leader and more about being a trainer than any 40-hour course could. Uh, to get to that point, you have to form that connection with them and have that little bit of mutual respect and those connections. Now, I never asked really personal questions, but I wanted to know about my trainee. I wanted to know if they had a family. I wanted to know what they like to do outside of work. Because one, I can turn training moments, I can make analogies back to things that they like to do. Uh, do they have a family? After their break, I can ask them if they got to spend some time with their family, how their family's doing. That just forms that connection, and the better you know someone, uh, the more open they are to your training. Now, as far as kind of like an administrative role, learning more about your training is I encourage you, if you've been a trainer for a year or longer, go back to some of those first trainees that you had, pull your daily observation reports, read them, but analyze them and look for the actual training that you provided, not just critiquing the call, the actual training that you provided, and look at the leadership lessons in those DORs and truly evaluate yourself. We're really good, and you've heard this before, everyone has. We're really good at holding other people accountable, but it's kind of hard sometimes for us to hold ourselves accountable. It took me a long time to learn that. you almost have to fall into that mentor and that coach role. And people say, well, why a mentor? Why a coach? Because those folks can see your blind spots. And we're really good at seeing our trainees' blind spots. That's easy, right? You're taking them from something unknown to known. But I've had a mentor in my entire career and still have mentors that I reach out to. And the reason I do that is they will be honest with you and they can see things that I can't because that accountability piece sometimes is so difficult. But I think that's how you get better. I think that's how you learn how to change your leadership style. Uh, and to be fair to each trainee, you sort of have to figure that out as soon as you get them and modify how you train, and that's modifying your leadership. I think I think an FTO, a trainer, whatever terminology you use, a trainer, I think they're one of the most valuable resources at an organization because every trainee that you train shapes the future of your organization.
We got a question from I got a couple great comments too, by the way. Um, Jason wrote, the last thing my trainee and I do every morning, I guess he works night shift probably.
Yes, sir.
Tell me one thing you did great on and one thing you didn't do so good on, and then tell me one thing I did really well on and one thing I could have done better. So I really like that. It's kind of
Like
builds
that.
on what you said.
Yes,
John said most of the best supervisors I've worked with were FTOs early in their career. Um, I-
absolutely.
so that idea, and this is something that we carry on in our first line leadership course too, Wayne, is that as a boss, right? You're going to get somebody out of training who's just met the bare minimum to be a police officer.
Yes.
You're still a coach, a trainer, a mentor. That first sergeant is so vital to officers' development. And I think some of that FTO mindset is built in if you are an FTO, that then you realize, hey, man, I got to keep this going. So talk a little bit more about that transition when that trainee makes it out of field training, has his first sergeant. What does that first sergeant mean to that trainee, and what should that first sergeant be doing?
Well, the FTO starts with modeling professionalism and showing that they're invested in them. And when they graduate or whatever term you use from the FTO program and they meet their first sergeant, I think that professionalism should continue. And training doesn't stop there. Just because someone completed an FTO program, and I've heard of programs anywhere from 6 to 18 weeks or longer, it doesn't matter. Just because you finish that training program, that doesn't mean that you know everything that you need to. That's when the true training starts. And it's so vital that those sergeants still invest in those officers, check on them, make sure that they have everything they need, uh, and continue that teaching or that training program. I remember I was in California, had just finished the FTO program, sat down in my car on the first day, and I was just praying they didn't call my car number. And what happens inevitably, the first call out of the box was mine. And I'm like, oh boy, one, I didn't know where it was at, so I had to find it, right? But I remember my sergeant, and unfortunately he's passed, but I remember my sergeant showing up on the call and just saying, Wayne, I'm just here to do anything that you need me to. And then afterwards, we debriefed the call. And he said, you did good, but you could improve on this, you could improve on that. And I think that's why that sergeant role is so vital. Uh, I think FTOs make great sergeants because they learn to deal with all of those administrative items. They learn to deal with personal issues. They learn to deal with professional issues. Um, and I'm also one of these believers that I believe that any FTO should, at a minimum, have been to an FTO class, a leadership class, and an instructor development class.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the whole idea of FTO master program here. We're definitely going to get to that too. Hey, So one of the chapters in the book that I found so interesting that not a lot of people talk about, Wayne, is learning in high stress moments, right?
Yes.
What a high stress event. And remember, people handle stress differently. So what might be stressful to me might not be stressful to Wayne. And we got to think about with our trainees is sometimes as a FTO, we think this is a low stress event, but the trainee is going through high stress. But the point is this, what are some of those things that happen in high stress events that affect a trainee's ability to make decisions and then ultimately to remember what they did or why they did things?
Absolutely. Well, I'm not even going to turn this into a generational thing, but if you think about your average trainee that's coming at now, 21, 22 years old, corrections, some places are hiring at 18. They've either just graduated high school or they've just graduated college or they've worked until they're old enough to come work with your agency. And now we're putting them inside a correctional facility. We're putting them inside a patrol car and we're exposing them to all of these high stress calls that they've never seen before. Now I'm going to back up just a little bit. That's where it's so imperative that academies indoctrinate them to stress. A little bit of stress is good, right? Because when you do that, when you're under stress, you get this whole dump of chemicals that does weird things to your body, just like stress does. Uh, you get tunnel vision, you start breathing, you can't think. Stress indoctrination ingrains that into your brain so that when you're stressed out, they will say, yes, I've seen this before. Academies, they lay the foundation for which us to build on. And part of that foundation is that stress that we expose them to, stress and discipline. So, uh, I've seen students who were straight A students, if you will, at the academy. And then when they get out into the street, the first time that they encounter verbal confrontation, they almost freeze up because their training tape runs out and they really don't know what to do from there. And that can be that can be dangerous because we don't want them to overreact. We want them to be able to appropriately respond to that stress. So, uh, like you said, everybody responds to stress differently, and exposing people to stress in the academy sort of programs their brain to where they say, "Yes, I've seen this before." So when they get into that situation out on the street, their brain tells them, yes, I've seen this before. This is how I responded, and they can appropriately handle the call. Now, as far as FTOs, I think, now I can tell you, my first day in a correctional facility, there was no easing into it, right? You go to work, you walk behind the closed doors, and all of a sudden I was in there with 110 felons, people have been charged with felonies. So you jump right into it. I think an FTO in patrol, we need to gradually expose them to that stress while there's somebody there with them that can have their back, uh, to ingrain that those stressful situations into their memory, so they sort of know what to do. Because when they're out there solo, when they're on their own, we don't want somebody to freeze and get hurt, right? We want them to be able to respond. And you don't want one of your trainees or past trainees to be the future YouTube sensation, right?
That's
So,
right.
but when people freeze, people don't know, they react instead of responding. Um, it can be dangerous. And you said it. Everybody responds to stress a little bit differently. Um, but when the brain sends that trigger that something's stressful or something is threatening you, that can be anything from a confrontation inside the car to somebody coming at you trying to hurt you. And I think we really need to push our trainees hard, but not but watch them and make sure that we don't give them too much stress.
Yeah, and that's chapter 6 in your book.
Mm,
I think, and you go into a lot more detail
I
about
do.
how the amygdala works and how
Right,
it works and how it releases the stress hormones that send you
mm,
into fight or flight.
right.
And those chemicals, right, they affect the way you perceive things. They affect the way your prefrontal cortex works, which is for
Absolutely.
executive function. And they ultimately affect, depending on how stressed you are, affect the way you remember things.
Oh, absolutely.
So 2 points here I think that
Absolutely.
should be made is number one, the one way to inoculate people from stress is to continually put them in low stress and you build stress,
Mm,
right? So
absolutely.
work them.
Work
A
them.
traffic stop,
Absolutely.
and when you're brand new, a traffic stop is a lot of stress because you have
It
to
is.
figure out where you're at,
Yes.
call it in on the radio, talk to a person who's not going to be happy that they could be getting a ticket, right? But that's just that
Absolutely.
basic stress inoculation. But the other point you made is the stress that the trainer puts on the trainee when
Absolutely.
they're having these conversations, right? So I think as a trainer, you have to create any communication. This is great. This is a great leadership tip.
Yes.
When you're having a conversation with a subordinate or with a whoever it is, right? Anybody, the less anxiety, the less stress you have in that conversation, the better the communication is, and there's a dialogue between two humans. And that's
Mhm.
what we're looking for, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've had trainees so far in the past that have been so socially awkward that even speaking to a citizen in perfect conditions would stress them out. But
Yeah.
yes, work them. Absolutely expose them to every type of call that you can. If you have any kind of simulator at your agency, learn how to use it and you can really get the heart rate up in some of those scenarios.
Yeah. And then have them debrief what they saw. So it starts working on that recollection of that stressful environment. Hey, we have a great point here. I think it's Daleen. So I hope I didn't butcher the first name there. Um, they say like they debrief the trainee right after the FTO program.
Okay.
Now, I will say that it sounds like it's really working for Daleen. I think in the
Hmm.
book you recommend debriefing the trainees maybe once they've been solo for at least 6 months to a year. And I think I agree with you because I've seen where conflicts in the car, personality conflicts, taint the trainees'
Yes.
mind as to what they learned. But if you wait 6 months and you interview them then, which I do think is important, they have a much better respect and a much better understanding of why they learned what they did and maybe come to appreciate it better. What are your thoughts?
I think so. Now I know a lot of agencies you have to do that debrief by accreditation. But
Hmm.
even so, I would encourage you to go back 6, 8 months after their solo and do the same evaluation or tweak it a little bit and ask them, what did I need more of? What did I need less of? What did I struggle with? I think the information is going to be a lot different because, when you're an FTO, there's always sort of a safety net there. You always have the trainer with you. But once you're out there by yourself and you're actually using this material, you might say, I really wish we'd have worked on traffic stops more. I really wish we'd have worked on just interacting with people more. So I think the information will be drastically different if you wait 6 to 8 months to do that evaluation survey.
Hey, we got a great question. How do you, if you work for a smaller agency or agency that's maybe not as busy as like a typical municipal mid-sized agency like we worked for, how do you train them on those incidents that they may never see in training, right? Like in this
I,
case, like a DUI or a domestic, they may not see one. How do you train them on something that they're not going to encounter during the training process?
well, I think you sort of need to take a page from John Wooden, basketball coach, UCLA. And he said you have to explain it, you have to demonstrate it, uh, you have to have them teach it back, and then you have to get the repetitions in. If you work at a smaller agency where you don't have as much of a call load, I would encourage you to partner up with somebody and talk the trainee through it, demonstrate it to them, have them teach it back to you, and then with a partner, just get some repetitions in. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, DUI is a perfect example of how you could probably do that for sure.
DUI, I would even add, and where Mike and I worked, we had a regional airport. We didn't have that many plane crashes. But what happened when we did? Everybody was scrambling to look at their policy manual to try to figure out how to get into the secure area of the airport, one, and then what we were supposed to do. So yes, you just have to be a little bit inventive in your training. You have to think outside the box, and if the trainee needs somebody to handcuff and there's no one else, guess what? The FTO is nominated. But do a lot of teach backs. Have them teach that back to you or another trainer or another officer. It doesn't matter.
That's the highest level of learning, right? When you can teach it back to somebody else.
Yes, it is. You retain about 90% of what you teach back.
Yeah, so how about this question, which I find, and you talk about it in your book as well, choosing an FTO, right? Um, because there's some great cops that just aren't good trainers, you
Yes.
know? Talk about choosing an FTO.
I said before, I think the FTO is the most important, the most critical person at an agency because they have so much impact. And you want the ones that have the temperament that can connect, but also train. And that's not always, like you said, you have some real superstars out there that answer calls, always writing tickets, always answering calls, taking people to jail, but they maybe necessarily can't train people. I think you should have some kind of process, whatever that looks like is up to your agency, but I think you should have some kind of process to where you truly vet your FTOs. And then you give them the training that they need. And that goes far beyond the 40-hour course. You know, they should come back to a training program at your agency, even if you just sit down with them. Uh, I like the idea of asking like, let's say we advertised it today. I like the idea of asking them for 4 or 5 incident reports that they wrote 6 months ago. I can learn a lot about an individual from an incident report, how thorough they are, how well they write. Some of the best FTOs that I've worked with were people who struggled or even went to remedial training in their FTO program. I can't explain it, and I've never researched it, but for some reason, I think they just get it and they know how to train. They know what you need because they asked for that help at one point in their career.
You know, one thing you touched on, and it kind of slipped my mind, but I want to get back to it, is that idea of, right, trust building, right? That idea that if the trainee knows that you care about the outcome and them succeeding, they're going to be that you're invested in their training. But that
Yeah,
moves on when you're a sergeant or when you're a lieutenant or when you're a captain, right? I mean, that idea
absolutely.
of people knowing that you have their best interests at heart, that's one of the biggest points of leadership, period.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Uh, I find that a lot of agencies have formal mentorship programs where you're assigned a mentor. But what I've found is that the trainee is going to latch on to one FTO that they connected with, and that's going to be their mentor for the remainder of their career. I've been retired for 7 years, and I still have people that I trained reach out to me, and they say, "Wayne, what do you think about this?" And that's when you truly know that you formed that connection with them. Um, I want to go back to one question about a smaller agency not as busy. That's where the what if comes into play as well. You know, as you're out on patrol or walking through, well, not necessarily in a correctional facility, you folks are busy 24/7, but always what ifing. And I always told my trainees, I'm going to ask you why you did things the way you did. And that doesn't mean that it was wrong. I just want to kind of get an idea of what your mindset is and how you think and how you work your way through problems. So it's always what ifing people. If you pull up to a gas station, what if somebody's robbing it? If you driving behind a car, what if the car slams on their brakes all of a sudden and people jump out of the car? What are you going to do? So you always want them thinking and working their way through those problems.
I remember that when I was going through FTO, and I don't think my FTOs ever did it to me, but I know there were other FTOs at the same time that were, some of my cohort, right? And they
Right.
would be like, they would scream like, "Oh, you've been shot. Where are you?" Like that's like, I don't think you're talking about that, right, Wayne?
No, 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 no. Just doing those what ifs and
Donald,
and
I see your point, and hey, we went through that early 2000s. We had a whole nother district. We were hiring people like crazy, and at that time they disbanded the FTO committee that I was on and just said, okay, and they just started naming people as field training officers,
yeah,
and we let some people through that were just ended up being fired in the long run because they just weren't. They shouldn't be there. They shouldn't have been there. But
yeah,
those fast growth periods are danger zones,
they are.
danger zones, and sometimes you have no control over it, but just do the best you can.
I think in those situations, the best thing you can do is always remember your role as a trainer. You can't push back against the organization. Systems theory tells us that we'll lose every time.
Yeah.
Uh, but as a trainer, regardless of what happens, you just have to do your job. And I'm huge on daily observation reports and detail being included in those DORs.
Last question for you, and then we're going to open it up to answer a few more questions. Um, you spoke about this a little bit about documentation on DOR, whether you call it a DOR or DEF or whatever
Right.
the term is, right? To document the actual training. And because we're a trainer first, but sometimes we get so stuck in evaluation, our
Yeah,
DORs become all evaluating and not documenting what you're doing to help the individual.
absolutely. When I look at whatever your terminology is, when I look at a DOR, I like to see how the trainee responded to the call, what they did, and the training that you gave them. I like DORs that are so specific that you even see policy numbers, you see state statute numbers, you see procedures, whatever you have at your organization. I even like to see those in the DOR because that shows me that a trainer, when pulled out all of their resources and walked you through why what you did was either correct or how you could improve. And 3, 4 years from now, if you ever have to testify to those DORs, then you won't have any problem recalling and telling a judge or a jury exactly what training you provided that trainee.
Yeah, and you touch on that in your book as well. All right, we're going to open it up for questions. But I want Wayne to take Wayne, give us the 60-second overview of what you've developed, right? This idea of the FTO Master Program. And I'm
Absolutely.
super excited about this. I mean, APC is going to have a small part of this, but this is really something Wayne developed, and I can't wait to break this out in 2026, Wayne. So tell us a little bit about it.
You know, I've been to a couple of leadership trilogies, like 3 classes over so many years or whatever, and I was stranded in an airport one day, and I started thinking, I was like, do we need a leadership trilogy? And I'm like, no, what we really need is something for the FTO. And just you can go to the APC website. We lay out the requirements in there. I'm not going to go into that. But the Master FTO program was designed to not only improve your training skills, but also to start training you as a leader. Because I refer to folks as FTO leaders. So it starts at a foundational level, and it goes to a little bit of a development level where you start. taking some resiliency courses, you start taking some leadership courses, an FTO program, and then the master course is the last one in the trilogy. And that's when we really tie training and leadership together and try to elevate your skills as an FTO leader. That's the Reader's Digest version of it.
All right, let's open it up to questions. First question, Wayne, how do you make training stick? I think you talked a little bit about the idea of teach backs as being something you can really do. What are some other ways? And what is the name of that book? I think it's called Stick or something like that.
Make it stick.
Make it stick, yeah.
Get stick. To make training stick, I think you just need to get the repetitions in. Because you truly are an FTO, you're trying to move things from short-term memory to working memory, where they're unconsciously competent. In other words, they have to think a little bit about what they're doing. They know how to do it, but they have to think about it. Uh, Always quizzing them in the car, and when they grasp something, take them back to a more basic level. Um, but you have to get the repetitions in for them to move it to long-term memory. And a lot of times I know that time constraints, that's kind of hard to do. But I love the teach backs. If you teach something back, you can tell me how to do something, you can show me, but I truly don't get it until I actually demonstrate it myself or teach it back to someone.
Great question too. How do you avoid, you're going to have a solid core of FTOs, right? You're going to have, but out of that, say you have 15 FTOs, or say you have five FTOs, you might have one or two or five FTOs, whatever, that are your go-to folks. How do
Right.
you avoid burnout? Because they may be getting the toughest trainees every single time. I feel
Yeah.
like Wayne, you might have been that person who got the remedial ones and stuff on a regular basis. How do you avoid burnout there?
I was. You have to have an excellent FTO coordinator. And at that time we did. And our FTO coordinator, the coordinators out there, you have to watch your FTOs. If you burn them out, they're not going to create that learning environment. And then they might want to leave the FTO program altogether. I worked for an excellent coordinator and I went to the lieutenant and I said, I can't handle any more trainees right now. I'm at my wit's end. I'm burnt out. I've had trainee after trainee after trainee. And this lieutenant would take you off the active roster until you went back and told him that you were ready for another trainee. And I think no matter how busy you are, you have to give them a break.
Agreed. Well, we got a lot of a couple of recommendations here for a specific program for DORs, Power Ready, Agency 360. I
Okay.
don't know. I'm sure Wayne, you've probably heard of that, right?
I've heard of Agency 360. I haven't heard of the other one.
I think they might be the same.
Okay.
They might be the same. Oh, Power DMS bought them out.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Question is, can you enter this current decision?
Mike, if I could throw one more point in there while we're waiting on some questions.
Go ahead.
When you develop a good FTO program, you also have to monitor that program. And then if you get FTOs that don't want to teach anymore, it's imperative that you remove them from that program. Or over time, if they become lazy and they're just not doing what they need to do. Um, and I would encourage agencies to, and it's not a negative on them. If they don't want to teach anymore, please remove them from that role because they can do a lot of damage if they don't want to teach.
Yeah, it's really a catch-22. As being
It
somebody in the
is.
command staff, you have to have FTOs, right? They're clamoring for FT. I just remember being on a command staff meeting and they're clamoring for FTOs.
Yes.
And I made the suggestion, and whether I was right or wrong, it didn't turn out to happen that way. But I said, listen, we just promoted seven corporals, whatever it
Mm,
was at the time, right?
right.
And I'm like, why wouldn't they be FTOs, right? Why these people are going to be sergeants one day?
Yes.
Why aren't they FTOs? And then, the point was made, which is a valid point, right? You never want to force anybody to be a field training officer. And
Right.
that's one of the reasons probably you don't want to mandate it for promotion because, again, if you mandate it for promotion, people are going to become field training officers, not because they have a heart of a teacher, but because
No.
they want to get promoted.
Right.
But on the flip side, Wayne, I mean, what prepares you better to be a boss than being a field training officer? I think
Well,
if you can't lead one person, how can you lead five?
there's no better preparation.
So I know it's a catch 22. I know
It
it's a catch 22.
it is. Because the FTO, if you do it right, it's a lot of work. So you ingrain that into you in the FTO program and you carry that into your first line supervisor role.
All right, we're gonna pop Wayne's book up here again. And Wayne, can you see that?
I can't. Well, there we can. Yes.
Okay, good.
Yep.
Hey, listen, we'd love for you to be at our conference. Um, seftoa.org, SEFTOA.org. Register early bird special through January. Only $325 for 3 days. And a pretty good rate there at the Embassy Suites too. The government rate, and it's in May, so it's a little bit less than if you were coming a little bit later. Yeah, Jeff, you say it's all about repetition, everything in life, operational reps, whatever it is. So the more you have conversations with a trainee about them not doing great or how they can improve, the better you're going to get at it. And guess what? That's going to help you when you're a sergeant and you're telling a struggling officer, hey, you're not doing as well as you should. These are some things we can improve on, right?
Absolutely.
Operational reps, for sure. Hey, Wayne, I think you wanted to answer this question too. Who do you think will find this book useful?
Well, I have to tell you real quick, I wrote the manuscript and I threw it in the trash. And I was getting ready to throw it away. And my wife looked at it and she's like, "Why don't you like this?" And I'm like, "Well, I think it's really, some of it's really basic." But then I thought back and she pointed me in that direction. There's a lot of agencies, I've been all over the country, and some agencies that I was a little bit intimidated with. Some of the trainers didn't grasp the basic concepts of training and adult learning. So I think this is for the aspiring, the new FTO, but it's also for the FTO that's been doing this for a while that sort of needs a refresher, if you will. So I think this is for anyone that trains, whether you're in corrections, whether you're in law enforcement, whether you're in communication center. Uh, there's something in this book for everyone.
Everybody, I put the link to the Master FTO program there in the chat again. Just jump on it. Take a brief look. You never know. It might be something you want to do. I know that we're super excited about it. I think Wayne talked about reading this book, but also whether you're taking an advanced FTO course, we offer one online as well, not so you can do it at your own pace anytime you want. It's called anytimepolicetraining.com. And you can get to that through APC website as well. But just continuous learning, right, Wayne? It's about growth. It's about always trying to improve.
It is. It took me a long time to learn this, Mike, but even at my age, I study every morning. I've learned to read books just a little bit differently. I used to zip through a book, put it on the shelf, and go to the next one. Uh, Now I'm reading one, and this is the third time I've read it because my new approach to learning and studying is I don't want to move on to the next book until I completely understand the one that I'm reading. But you always have to be growing. Uh, I think if we grow personally, we'll grow professionally. So I encourage people to work on themselves. Uh, if you need any tips, reach out to me because I've done a lot of work on myself and I'm finally getting to the point to where I think I'm pretty good.
Yeah, and you can either reach me or Wayne. We're on LinkedIn. You can
Yes,
reach us through our website. If you send us an email, we'll get it to Wayne. And I'm going to send everybody a follow-up email with the recording link in it. So if you want to share it with another field training officer or somebody who wants to train or is a trainer or wants to be a leader. I think this kind of book kind of fills all those roles. And so you'll have a link, and we'll make sure we get Wayne's email in there as well in case you want to email.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear from you.
All right, I think that does it, Wayne. We're right at about we're getting close to an hour, so
All
we'll stay
right.
on for a little bit, but I think that does it for us. If you
Yes,
want to ask a question, me and Wayne will stay on for a little bit.
absolutely. Thank you for coming. I've enjoyed this.
Um, Eric, okay, I will answer Eric's. Maybe somebody else has this question too. This is not a certificate training. This is a help you improve. Yeah, we don't give certificates for our webinars. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, everybody who's for the well wishes. Hey, what about this? Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, however you celebrate. Enjoy the time with your loved ones, your spouse, your families, your extended families, your friends. We really wish you the best. For those of you who are working, Lord knows, thank you, thank you, thank you, and take care of yourself. Take care of each other, especially in these holiday times. If you're a boss, make sure you take care of the folks that are working with you every day, and give them what they need and how they need it and stuff.
Donald, if you will send me an email and you can reach me through that info at Advanced Police Concepts, I will explain to you how to complete each step of the Master FTO program. Or call me. And Mike, thank you very much for doing this webinar.
Of course, dude, it was